right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight I have Darren Gallina from California. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It is finally great to get to talk to you. We haven't run into each other. I think I've seen you at a convention or two here or there, but we've never had a chance to sit down and talk. So tonight we are going to do that. Where are you in California?
I actually live in Lompoc, California, and Lompoc is right smack dab in the middle of the state on the coast, about halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Okay.
I'm about 50 miles north of Santa Barbara. And I'm actually surprised about the number of people that know Lompoc. Mostly they have like military ties because we have a military base. For the longest time, we had an Air Force base in our city or next to our city. It was Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Heard of it?
It is now Vandenberg Space Force Base. So we do a lot of missile launches from here. All of a sudden, this is like the West Coast launch space, I guess, for SpaceX. And they're launching like at least one rocket. Well, I don't know if it's a rocket or a missile.
Yeah.
A rocket once a month, and I think this month they got two going. So we haven't seen this since like the 70s when NASA was shooting rockets off from Vandenberg. And at one point they had planned to launch the space shuttle from here. It never really took off, so no pun intended. But yeah, so we're not people kind of know us for the military base here, and I'm always surprised. Oh yeah, I know where Lompoc is. So yeah, but we're right there on the coast in the middle of the state.
I have never heard of it until tonight. Of course, I've heard of Santa Barbara, but never heard of Longpoke. Okay. And you're on the coast. How close are you to the beach?
We're probably about 5 miles inland from the beach.
Nice.
So actually, it's it's yeah, it's an okay beach. You don't want to go swimming there because they have the rip tides, but we are close to the beach. It's probably, I don't know, 5 minutes, 5 minute drive to the beach.
I grew up in a coastal town in Thunderbolt, Georgia, which is Savannah. So love being near the
Okay.
ocean, near the rivers, and all that stuff. So, and at some point, hopefully within the next 2 years, we'll get back. We're probably going to go to Florida, my wife and I, once I retire at some point from the real world, and we'll see. Uh, but
Um,
are you born and raised in California?
I was born in Oxnard, California, which is down the road a piece, about an hour and a half. And my father got a job. Both my parents were in education for years, and he got a job as a school teacher in Lompoc and moved the family up there probably when I was 6 months old. So I lived most of my life in California. Um, when I was six, I spent a year in London. Just kind of packed the bags and said, "See you later, parents. I'll be back." No, um, my parents took a sabbatical, um, and took a year off. Went to London. My dad went to London University to study for a year. Um, and I went to school there. I have a sister who's 5 years younger than me,
Mhm.
and so she wasn't quite in school yet. But I remember going to first grade in London, and I learned to ride a bike in the UK. So,
Very
and
nice.
I saw the Queen in person.
No
So,
kidding.
yeah,
Outstanding. Okay.
she was appearing somewhere, and we were there, and I got to see her. That was pretty cool, though.
That's
So,
absolutely. I would love to have a memory like that. That's good stuff with the Queen. For some reason I've got a connection to the royal family. I love all the weddings and all that stuff. Never been there, but you get super.
really,
Yep. So
it's amazing. Well, you should take a trip.
at some point,
You should really you should go to London, see Buckingham Palace,
yeah,
Tower of London, all those great places.
at some point we're gonna try and get over there. Just I don't know when. Maybe after I retire. Who knows?
There you go.
So
There you go.
So you were over there in the first grade. When did you start square dancing? Was it in London or was it back here?
It was actually back home. It's kind of a funny story because so my parents danced before I was born. They danced in Oxnard with a club called the Romping Stompers, which no longer exists anymore. Kind of disappeared like a lot of clubs do. And so after they had me and they had my sister, they got back into square dancing in Lompoc. There was a club at the time in Lompoc called the Rocking Squares. And I was probably 12, I guess, maybe 13. I was probably 12. Um, when they took us to a dance, we couldn't dance, but they were dancing and we kind of hung out there. And there was, at that time, was a kind of a family atmosphere. So there were some kids there that were our age. And it's like, hey, we want to do this too. So when September rolled around, they went to the club and said, our son and daughter want to learn how to square dance. And they're like, oh no, we don't we don't we don't allow kids at our dances. Can you believe that?
Oh gosh.
Today? Yeah, but back then, yeah, we don't allow kids. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise. We had to drive 30 minutes north to the next city, Santa Maria, which had a couple of square dance clubs there. And that's where we took lessons with a club called the Squaws and Paws. And the
Okay.
caller was Darryl Hamilton and his wife Bonnie. Um, and Darryl, um, God bless his soul, um, taught me how to square dance
Nice. Okay.
and taught my sister and I how to square dance, I should say. And you know, and so that was what, 75, 1975 when I learned to square dance. And so we learned to dance with Squaws and Paws, and we were a member of that club. And Darryl was also the caller that taught me to call.
Okay.
And he gave me my first record. I remember I was just infatuated with the music at the time. And of course, it was the 70s. So there's a lot of that twangy guitar, Telecaster guitar, and banjo and fiddle. And it was just great music. And he gave me my first record, Something About You, Baby, I love, like,
Okay.
on Chaparral by Jerry Haig. And what a great piece of music. Even today, I still like that tune. Um, Not necessarily a good first record for somebody who's never really sung before and or has called before. It, I tell the story that it took me 15 years to perfect it to the point where I could actually do it in public.
Okay.
But yeah, I got that song. I still haven't used it periodically today, but uh, through Darryl, I learned where to buy square dance records because we had to buy records in those days, and was able to get a couple more tunes that are kind of a little easier to call for a brand new singer caller kind of guy. And I took a class through the basic and mainstream with him as kind of a assistant teacher, so to speak.
Okay.
And that was kind of the start of it. Darryl, I have so much respect for the man. Um, as a person and as a caller, and he was just one of those guys, just a local club caller, was just happy calling for his group every week and maybe visiting other clubs on anniversary and special nights and maybe being doing a guest caller spot here for another local club, but not interested in taking it beyond that. And he was a really good club caller, which is tough to do when you got to call for the same group of people week after week after week.
It,
That's
it sure
probably the
is.
toughest gig as a caller. So, and I moved on. I didn't say moved on. I actually wanted something bigger than that, but he was really supportive in my calling, and so I am very appreciative to
How
him.
old do you think?
How long have you been calling?
I've been calling about, I started 12 years ago, but I've really been doing it for about 10 now. I've been with Color Lab 10 years. And
Okay.
so actually doing my own dances and, trying to do stuff for about 10 years. How old do you think you were when he gave you that singing call?
Um, well, I was probably about 14. And I tell the story that had I known I'd be doing this like 47 years later, I would have kept better records. I do remember that my first dance was in September of 1977.
Okay.
I was 15 years old. My parents had to drive me to the dance because I didn't have a license to drive yet. And so they went with me to most all the dances I did up until I was 18. Once I hit 18, they're like, here are the car keys and the map. You're on your own. Have fun. So,
I
but that
can't
first dance,
just,
yeah, that was for a club in Santa Maria, um, called the Valley Whirlers. And I was 15. I did my first full dance there and ended up becoming their club caller for I don't know 6 7 years. A little later on, a couple years after that. So yeah, good times.
what was the, now, so early on, and I'm still, like I said, I started doing my own and way beyond that. I think so. If I'm 56 now, I probably started doing my own dances when I was 46, and I was a nervous wreck. I can't imagine doing it when I was 15, 16 years old, like some of the people I've talked to and you. Um, what was the process? So I started out, I did about a year of singing calls. And then one of the gentlemen, I had a couple of guys that were helping me out with patter, and they were like, "Hey, write a little something down, try and memorize this." What was your where? How did you get into patter and everything, choreography?
Oh man, that's a real good question. Um, Honestly, I don't know. Specifically, I don't know. I remember writing a lot of patter. Um, so what was I, 15 when I started? Probably a lot of patter at that point was probably written down. That moving checkers. Well, at that point we had dolls, but on this little metallic plate, and they had magnets on the bottom of them. We move them around, and um, I was still in high school, and I met a caller from Hemet, um, Jerry Hamilton, who taught me kind of a shorthand way of writing out patter with like, I don't know, circles and triangles and stuff for as dancers. And I remember sitting in class in high school, instead of taking notes, I'm in the back just like writing patter. And I think that is a good way to learn how to sight call. There's a lot of different ways to call patter, and reading. There's nothing wrong with having note cards or reading patter. There are some callers who are very, very good at that. You and rely on that heavily to, written having written cards, and they're going through the cards as they call. Some people use little modules to get from point A to point B, or from point A all the way back to point A, and then there's sight calling. And I have to say, at this stage of my calling career, I use all three of those.
Right.
I use some written stuff, I use some modules, and I do a lot of sight calling. And I think doing all that, writing all that choreography, got me to see patterns and connections and finding corners. Um, And so when to me, it was almost kind of like learning how to drive a car with a clutch.
Yep.
You struggle with it, you struggle with it, and then all of a sudden you get the timing down where the clutch and the shifting is in sync and everything's working. And that's kind of how it fell into place for me as far as sight calling goes and finding corners. Um, I struggle a little bit when you got the club outfits and everybody's dressed the same and
Yep.
they square up right in front of you and like, oh man. So yeah, but that that's about the best I can do as far as how did I start patter
Okay.
calling.
No,
And then
that's
of course there's the
outstanding.
whole chant thing. You know, you can just kind of say the calls, but I think there, you know, to kind of make it sound a little more professional, you got to kind of have that they call it a chant, the sing-songy voice, and that takes some practice too. And just I had to work at that a little bit to where I could get the chant down.
Yeah.
And there's some great callers that don't chant as well, but there's some really good chanters out there too. So
Some of the schools that I've gone to, that's a big part of it. Some in the patter is dancers don't want to be um, drill sergeant called to. It's just call, call, call. You doesn't matter what the music is. It's going to sound the same coming from this caller. But no, you have to. And I've noticed that when I get to go to national conventions or something like that, and I'll see these callers that I don't get to see on a regular basis. One of the just phenomenal Jack Platty's, his patter, it matches the music he's playing behind it. It is just phenomenal. And there's a bunch of them out there that are really good at it. But Jack is a different level when I just listen to him when it comes to, hey, I'm going to play this music, but he knows ahead of time. It's something you've got to plan. So yeah,
right.
so there is a cadence to it, and they don't want to be barked at, I guess, because I guess I was bad about that starting out. Because just like you said, I would write stuff down or I memorize a specific thing, and it was didn't care what the music was, right and left through, veer left, Ferris wheel, centers pass through, and there's like, are you demanding they do this, or are you calling to them? So yeah, there's something to that.
But yeah, and when I started calling, um, I think my parents were very involved with my calling, especially my mom, God love her. Um, and I think they saw some talent there. And so they started taking us. It was a family outing. They started taking us to these festivals where the big time traveling callers were calling. um we'd go to chaparral weekends, we'd go to Rhythm Fest.
Nice.
Um and I'd walk in there with my tape recorder, my cassette tape recorder, and I'd ask them, can I record the dance? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I plugged in, and so I had all these dances on cassette tape. So I go back and listen to the patters and, uh, you know, saw how they put calls together and formations and the the really cool get outs that you hear them do. And also I started listening to how they were calling, and that's basically how I learned to chant, to sing, if you will, sing my patters. And yeah, so that I was really thankful for that. So my parents made sure I was around, because that's what I look up on stage, it's like, that's what I want to do. I want to be up there on a weekend. I want to travel as a caller. And, you know, you do it, you find a way to do what they're doing that fits your style and how you call, and you make it work. And that's really the secret to the whole thing. So,
Absolutely.
and I have to say that Gary Shoemake and Ken Bauer were both, they were, all the callers were very nice, but Gary and Ken and Wade were all generous with their time, and were pretty helpful with me in learning to call. So um, I'm thankful for that. And we're still friends. So it's kind of cool.
Absolute legends, Gary and Ken and Wade. Um, I've had the opportunity to talk to all of them except for Ken. I haven't had a chance to talk to Ken Burke yet, but at some point I will. I hope. All the years you've been doing it, have you got a chance to travel? Where have you been?
Oh, let's see. I've done a few dances in Canada, Vancouver, Toronto. Um, I've done a couple cruises to Mexico. The square dance cruises have been to Mexico. So where else have I? As far as calling goes, that's about the only international things I've done. Um, I'd still like to go back to the UK. Um, uh, I know there's like a lot of dancing over in Europe. And personally, I don't know if I'm ready for that because that's a whole different schedule in dancing because they dance straight through for like an hour and a half. Then they take a 20-minute break and then they dance for another hour and a half. Um, that European style dancing. I don't know if I'm up for that, but I don't know. One of these days, maybe I'd give it a try. I'd really like to go to Japan too. Um, I went to a couple of the Aloha festivals in Honolulu, Hawaii that Buddy Weaver put on,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of years there's been a contingency of Japanese dancers there and Japanese scholars, so I got to know some of them, and really nice people. And I think I'd like to call sometime in Japan.
That would be something.
I don't know exactly how that works. There's kind of a invitation system
Yeah.
that to call in Japan. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. We're
Well,
working on that.
yep.
So
And I think I said Ken Burke earlier. It's Ken Bowers. Ken Bauer, I'd
yeah,
love to
Kim
talk
Bauer.
to him. I
Yeah.
haven't had the
Yeah.
opportunity to talk to him. Ken Burke, I know him pretty well. I've talked to him a few times. He just came to Atlanta, and of course, I was out of town doing another thing in South Carolina, so we missed each other.
Mhm.
Um, of the places you have called, and even in California, are there any venues, halls, dance floors, anything that stand out to you? It's just memorable.
Oh well. There's a hall in Bakersfield. Actually, I think it's in Oildale. And the name of the hall will come to me, but it's round. It's a round hall, so or octagonal. It's not a square building. So it's weird because they have the stage and you're on stage and the squares are kind of at an angle to you
Um,
because they've got a specific wall, but the stage is not at that wall. It's kind of between, if you figure octagonal, it's kind of in a corner and not flat against the wall. So they line up on an angle to you, and the heads are kind of going this way, and then the sides are going this way. So it takes a little getting used to like, oh, okay, they're not like right smack dab in front of you. But I don't know. And then there have been other calls. I got this thing, and I feel like I'm the only caller. I go and do some festivals, and a lot of callers like to put the table in front of them when they call and have the music there in front of them. And I feel like I get disconnected from the dancers when the table's in front of me. So I'm one of those guys that likes the table off to the side. So I'm like right there in the dancers. And I was calling in this hall and they put the table in front of me. Then there was this iron um, fencing, if you will. And then between the fencing and the dance floor is um, like a planter box with fake flowers in it. So now all of a sudden you've got this, I don't know, foot and a half planter box with flowers in it, a fence, and a table. I felt like I was in another room. And the dancers were like way over there. And I'm like,
Wow.
that makes it a little difficult for me as a caller. Um, I've been in some really nice halls, some great barns. Um, for private events and stuff, you're like, wow. But yeah, so those are the ones that come to mind right now.
No, those are great. I would love to see one in the round like you were talking about. That and of course I one of my jokes is when if somebody hires me, I kind of ask them, do you have a stage? If do you have something I can stand? Because I mean, on a good night, I'm 5'6", and so if I've got a number one couple that the man is 5'11", I'm not seeing anything past him if they're right in front of me. So I love the stages, and I've been on a few, which is nice. And like you were saying about the table, I don't like anything between me and the floor. One, because I love to be the center of attention. I want to be standing out in front, and it's just easier for me to see. And like you said, it feels like you're in a different room because if I put
Yeah.
the table in front of me and I open my laptop, now I had the laptop. You see my chin. You see from my chin up. That's all you're seeing of me for the most part. If I'm not on a stage, if I'm on the floor, that's what you get. So I like to be out there, and I'll catch myself at my club. The way I'm set up, I'll catch myself. I've got enough court. I'll be standing between. We usually have 3 or 4 squares. I'll be standing between the squares. I'll just keep walking out into the floor, and then I realize I need to back up. I can't see anybody anymore. But I just want to be in the middle of it all. So I agree, and I understand not wanting anything between you and the dance floor for sure.
It's
Oh
just
my
that
goodness,
connection with the dancers
it is.
and being feel like you're part of the dance versus, disconnected from the dance.
The only, and I've never thought of it this way, but of all the concerts I've gone to, rock concerts, country concerts, whatever, the only one that I thought it was weird was Night Ranger because the singer was the drummer. Everybody else, the singer's out front, and
Uh-huh.
so Night Ranger, it was weird because the drummer is the singer and he's sitting back there. And I was like, look, he should be out front. But that makes a lot of sense having it like that. As
Yeah.
long as you've been dancing and calling, what levels do you call and dance at?
Um, I dance through A2 and I also call through A2. There's some theories that you should dance one level higher than you call.
I have heard that.
Um, but I don't know. I seem to do pretty good at both. So dancing through A2 and calling through A2. I wouldn't consider, I don't know. To me, there are callers who are A2 callers, and then there are people who call A2.
Okay.
And I'm one of those guys that calls A2. I wouldn't consider myself an A2 caller. Guys like Bill Harrison, I think he's definitely an advanced caller, advanced and challenge caller. Same thing with Vic Cedar. Vic Cedar lives in my backyard. He probably lives 20 minutes from my house.
Wow. Okay.
And so we see each other on a regular basis. Vic and Debbie's daughter and her boyfriend live in Lompoc, a couple blocks from my house. So I see them around town as well. And so I feel very honored to get to go to lunch with Vic and Debbie. I know there's a lot of people that just would give their little finger to
So
like spend an
absolutely.
hour with them and go to lunch with them. But to me, um, Vic is an advanced and challenge caller. I just call advanced. I don't know. My approach to calling is kind of a wind in your hair feeling where it's just smooth dancing and you're just enjoying the music and the calls and putting everything together. Um, and even at the advanced level, I'm kind of the same way. Now, if you want your butt kicked and you want to be like, really challenged at the advanced level, I'm not your guy. You want to come and have fun
Have
and a
fun.
good time and hear cool music, then you're at the right dance. But if you really want to be challenged, you got to go to guys like, Bill Harrison and Vic Cedar and all those other, I don't know, Steve Kopman.
Oh yes,
So
yep.
those guys. So yeah, but and part of that problem is, and I think it's getting to the point, I'm going to get up on my soapbox. It's almost to the point now where I feel like in order to get hired for some of these festivals, you got to be able to do C1 because that's where, we kind of got the reverse pyramid going where we got more dancers at the higher level than we do at the lower level. And so these festivals are looking for callers who can call C1. And I just don't do that. And in my area, we barely at this point, especially after COVID, we barely have enough to get through plus. We maybe have two or three advanced dancers in our area, but we don't have anybody that are ready to move up to advanced yet, let alone challenge. There's no if you don't count, I mean, if you count Vic and Debbie, there's two people that do challenge in our county, if you will, in our general area. There's just two people. Well, three if you count Caitlin, their daughter. But so we really don't have any place to learn. I would love to learn challenge. And probably if I didn't have a day gig, maybe I'd drive the 2 hours to LA on a Sunday to take a challenge class to learn how to call challenge or to learn to dance challenge so I could call challenge. But I don't know. At this point, I can't really do it. So, but yeah, I too.
That's awesome.
Now, what
So,
levels do you dance?
again, I know the theory you should dance one above what you call, but I don't. I dance plus, up to plus. I've taken advanced a couple times, but there's so few. There's just one club we've talked about, Hotlanta, that dances A and C down here, and I don't get over there very often. So I don't. After I took the lessons, I quit. I didn't dance it anymore. So I can't dance it. So I do plus, and I call up to plus. At some point, I'm going to get into the advanced. I don't know. I would like to, because again, some places want you to do advanced, and I just don't know it. Now, going all the way through A2 with all that, and I've asked pretty much everybody I've talked to so far, do you have a favorite call at any level?
Um, that's a good question. Hmm. I don't think I have one favorite call. Um, excuse me. As a dancer, I like I like Grand Square.
Okay, that's good.
I like Load the Boat. I like Relay the Deucey.
That's my
Chain
favorite.
Reaction's fun. Um, Motivate's okay. Motivate, yeah, Motivate. So there's a few. I don't know if as a caller, is there a specific call I like? Not really. Maybe Alaman left. Yay, I got him
Yeah,
back to their corner.
you got them back to the corner. Um, of all the calls you've done, did you have to? And I certainly wouldn't try and put you on one. What are your favorite singing calls to do?
Like right now? Like
Anytime.
what? Man, because it keeps changing.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Good question. What are my favorite singing calls right now? I've always loved Something About You, Baby, I Like. I think we talked about that one in the
I got
first.
that one.
Dude, I think we talked about that with Darryl. Um, Rockin' in Rosalie's Boat is a classic. I
Hmm.
like that one. Um, a little more modern, I'd say. Um, Buddy Weaver's got a nice version. He just came out with it's called Neon Moon.
Yeah.
Really nice version of that. I'm digging that. That's like one of my new favorites right now. He did a great version of Amy. I like that one. Um, I'm a huge I'm a huge rhythm fan. Um, Probably right before we got all digital and all that, I think I own the entire rhythm catalog in vinyl. Um, Most of the songs I've done, some of them I bought, I call them closet songs. It just, oh, that's got a great beat. Oh, I love the guitar in that. But and I love to call to it, but it's just missing something that doesn't click on the dance floor.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of those that I've got that I love to sing, but I don't typically do them at dances, but I just love the instrumentation on them. There's a song on rhythm called Escape, the Pina Colada song.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Really like I really like that one. Um, he just came out with a new version of Don't It Make Your Brown Eyes Blue? He did that on I think it was Circle D back in the day. Um, Great version back then. This one is pretty good too. Um, so I'm kind of digging those songs. Yeah.
So you personally, if it's not square dance, what's your music genre that you go to?
Um, Mostly classic country,
Very nice. Okay.
60s, 70s, 80s country. Um, I like a little bit of pop music now and then. I'm more into pop music now than I have been in the past, simply because we take some of the pop tunes and turn them into
Mhm.
patter records, just using stuff you hear on the radio, just the original tunes. I should say the dance mixes mostly of the pop tunes and stuff. And we've got this thing that we do. We call it Pop Star Patter, and it started out. I don't know. I think using pop music, like the dance mixes of pop songs, kind of was right before it hit big. We started using them for patter records, and we started to put together this hour of what we call the pop star patter hour, and we used all pop star tunes for the patter music, and then we tried to find as current music as we could, or that had a current sound that was kind of a pop sound, um, to to go with those patter things. And we did this hour, initially at a lot of LGBTQ conventions, and it was one of the specialty hours with the pop star patter, and was very well attended. And in the beginning, a lot of callers were saying, "Hey, what's that song? What's that song? What's the name of this one?" And so in the early days, I would print up a playlist that people could use. This is the song and the performer, you go find it. And some of the songs we've tweaked just a little bit to kind of shorten the intro. Some parts of the song are missing a beat, so we add a little beat underneath so people will know where to put their foot down and to keep dancing. So we've kind of changed up some of them up just a little bit. Nowadays, there's a lot of people who are using the dance mixes and all that kind of stuff. So we don't necessarily have to provide a playlist, but dancers still love to come to the Pop Star Patter Hour. And clubs, I do club dances and people are saying, can you do some of your pop stuff? And I'm like, sure. Or we just did the California State Square Dance Convention a couple of weeks ago, and they put a Pop Star Patter Hour in that convention as well. So the rest of the square dance world is starting to see that and enjoy that. So yeah, we do that as well. What's your favorite singing call right now? Have you got a favorite?
Yeah, it's jambalaya. That's kind of a joke around here now. That's I've done jambalaya since day one of my calling. I don't even know what label it's on anymore.
I was going to ask, what label is it on?
It's an old label because it's an older version, for sure. But that and I've got my own club now, and so it's like I have to change music. You can't do the same stuff over and over because there's a difference between a club caller and a traveling caller or something like that. Because a traveling caller, you take it on the road and you can do dances on Friday night and Saturday night, and you've got completely different dancers. And I wouldn't do that to my club. I'll come in there and I'll do a bunch of stuff that I just bought or just picked up from somewhere. And so I try and mix it up for them. But jambalaya, of course, I recorded Troubadour, George Strait song about a year and a half ago. And I tell you what, I think my favorite of all time for everything is Scott Bennett has Simple Man, a Leonard Skinner version of Simple Man, and absolutely love it. If I'm at a convention, I'm pulling Simple Man at some point. And of course jambalaya, because it's just it seems like a freight train when you're listening to it. It's just fast and it goes, and I love that. So I've got a few favorite singing calls out there right now. What do you have coming?
What label did you do? What label did you do Troubadour on?
Was that Tony Oxendine and Ted Lazat did a school where we did it, and it's TOTL, TOTL Recordings. Tony Oxendine, Ted Lazat, is where that came from. They've done another class since then, and they just released a new one from Bear Miller that he recorded with them, and so it's a really cool setup they have. And
how was that? So, not to turn the interview around, but how was that school? Because I've heard, there's because Ted and Tony have the singing call school, and Wade and Shauna now have their singing call school. So I'm kind of curious as to what the experience is like.
Now I haven't been to Wade and Shauna's. Now I'll say this: we were the first. I said there were 8 of us that went to the TOTL one in Nashville, and Shauna was there, and so was Scott Bennett, and they sat in. They helped out a lot with us, and so we spent a week in Nashville. We went to the recording studio, watched them putting the music together, which was ridiculous. Watching somebody, the session players they had come in doing the music, they come in and in a matter of 4 or 5 hours, they have 8 different songs that they didn't know what they were playing. They play like 10 seconds on a CD and say, hey, this is Troubadour by George Strait. And they're like, all right, we got it. And then they just start playing. And then for the rest of the week, we were at the hotel we were at in Nashville. We had Tony, Ted, Shauna, and Scott Bennett were there. And, they worked with us as callers. It was a caller school. We spent the day, this is how you do site calling. This is how you do module call. We went through all that stuff. And in the afternoons, hey, this is your song, Charlie. Let's work on the lyrics. Let's see how we're going to do this. And then on the last day, we went to the studio and we did the lyrics. And we went into the booth, and it was horrifying because you have Tony Oxendine and Ted Lazat staring at you from the other side of the glass. And I have trouble staying on key sometimes, so I actually had Tony in the other booth with a headset on, singing into my ear to keep me on key from the beginning of my song. And so,
Nice.
it was a lot of fun. And then Shauna and Wade have theirs now. At some point, I don't know if I'll ever get out to California, but I would like to come out that direction. But I'd like to do it again with Tony and Ted. It was a great experience. And of course, you're in Nashville. So, I mean, what more do you want from square dancing to be in Nashville? And one night we actually got to go over and spend some time in downtown Nashville. So it was a lot of fun.
Lower Broadway. So the studio, I geek out about square dance music, and I have all these facts about square dance songs in I couldn't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can tell you stories upon stories of square dance songs and all the rest of that. What studio were you using in Nashville? Do you
The
remember?
studio is Hilltop Recordings. And the stuff on the wall, the people that have been in there recording, the actual country people that have been in there, uh, it's just amazing. And to think, I'm in here and I'm sitting on this big giant sofa with the guy behind the board, and watching Tony and Ted talk to the musicians playing it. And it was a phenomenal experience. Something I'd love to do again at some point. But yeah, that Hilltop Recordings is it's amazing.
Isn't that a beautiful studio?
It is. You pull up and it's a house. You're like, that's just a house. And you walk in and they have these different little studios in there. And it's just like you see if you've ever watched any kind of rock documentary. There's this massive board and there's one guy behind it moving everything. And then the players are there. And at first they said, "Hey, you can probably go in there and do some vocals," and I was like, "There's no way I'm walking in there and trying to do vocals with the actual people playing the music. That would just scared me to death." But
So
yeah, it's a heck of an experience to go up there for sure.
I'll have to so I'll share with you my Hilltop Studios
Yeah.
story. I have a couple of music. Oh, I could tell you musician stories for days. Um, so one year, God, what did I spend? 4 years, 5 years, maybe longer than that. Color Lab was in Nashville. One year Color Lab convention, and so I went to that because I love Nashville, and so Hunter Keller, Justin Russell are both friends of mine, very dear friends. They've been out to call for my club. They've stayed at my house. We've hung out. Um, and we were kind of hanging out at Collar Lab as well. And so Hunter invited me to go to the recording session that they were having on Wednesday afternoon after the Collar Lab convention was over. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll go. So we went to the Hilltop Recording Studio, and I remember meeting the engineer was Kevin, I want to say McManus. I think it's Kevin McManus. He was the engineer, may have been the engineer in that because Tony was using
Yeah,
him.
probably
So,
was.
um, and there were several other people that got invited to the studio for the recording. And I remember I was the only one that was there watching what was going on. I was like sitting right next to Kevin at the board, watching the musicians do their thing and watching Kevin work his magic on the board. Everybody else was sitting on that couch behind them, just blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you guys, this is like magic happening. You've got the fiddle player for Garth Brooks in there laying down a track for a square dance song. The guy playing bass, I remember I talked to him as well, and he um, did a lot of the early recordings for the group Alabama. And I remember him telling me what a perfectionist that Randy Owen is. And when they're Randy's doing his vocals. He wants the whole band there playing at the same time. And he was telling me about how annoying this was to him as a musician. Hey, we got our part down. What do you need us here for? And him speaking up about it and getting kicked out of the session. But anyways, so I'm like, oh wow, cool stories. Um, but Kevin McManus, the guy that, and I don't know if Tony still uses him because like this was 5 years ago, but Kevin McManus was also the engineer for the early Chaparral records. So a lot of those Chaparral records that you have that were, you know, I don't know how many years he was there, but he was the engineer on for Chaparral too for a long time, and I think he's won a couple Grammys as well. So, you know, the talent that we have that we're exposed to or that we have working on our music is just, I find it amazing that these guys will come in and do these sessions for our little square dance records, you know? Um, so amazing. Um, Another story that's kind of off topic, but I have a band and we pretty much do live music square dances. And I've been doing this probably um since I was 17, 18, and I've had different bands that I've worked with over the years. This particular group I've had with me probably for over 20 years. The group of musicians that play with me now. One of the fiddle players, I have basically a stable of musicians. I have a couple of lead guitar players that play with my group. I have a couple fiddle players that play with my group. I have one specific drummer because he's usually available when I ask. And I have a couple bass players that I use. A lot of these guys are all the musicians are based in LA. And they're all studio guys. They all, well, they used to tour. Um, the main lead guitar player that I have, John McDuffie, he was the music director for Rita Coolidge up until she retired, right? COVID hit and she retired. So prior to that, I'd kind of have to arm wrestle Rita Coolidge for John to come and play with our, I can't play, Rita's on tour. I'm like, crap. I'm like, okay, all right, I got to get somebody else. But and one of the fiddle players I had, he's since retired. Essentially, I was forced to retire due to medical reasons, but he did the first couple albums and toured with Dwight Yoakam. Are you familiar with country music?
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you've probably heard Dwight Yoakam's Guitars, Cadillacs, hillbilly
Hillbilly.
music.
I
Yeah.
know Dwight Yoakam.
So all that fiddle work was done by a guy by the name of Brantley Kearns, and he did that album, Honky Tonk Man. Dwight did a version of Honky Tonk Man. He played the small fiddle part on that and also did the harmony on that. Well, anyways, Brantley grew up in the Carolinas and lived out in California and did a lot of square dances for me. And he used to go to this fiddle camp put on by a guy by the name of Johnny Gimble. Johnny Gimble is a famous fiddle player, played with Bob Wills. And Johnny Gimble was also the producer for several years of Chaparral Records. Those early releases is all that fiddle work is Johnny's work. They did Chaparral did a version of The Devil Went Down to Georgia, and that was all Johnny Gimble on the fiddle with that.
I think I have
So
that.
Brantley was telling me one time we were doing a square dance gig, and Brantley says, "Hey, I'm off to," and it was we were just kind of sharing stories and stuff. He's like, yeah, I'm off to Texas for Johnny Gimbel's fiddle camp. I'm like, when you going? Oh, I'm going in about a month or so. And I knew we had another gig coming up. And I'm like, hey, if I gave you a record, would you take it to Johnny and ask him to sign it for me? He's like, sure. So I went through all my square dance records, dug out my copy of The Devil Went Down to Georgia, and I gave it to Brantley. I said, would you ask him to sign this for me? And he did. And so the next time I saw Brantley, he said, here's your record. And Johnny was impressed.
Yeah,
He
that's
was
awesome.
really impressed that you had a copy of he was just flabbergasted by that. I'm like, well, you. So I got a signed copy of The Devil Went Down to Georgia with Johnny Gimbel on there. Um, and somehow I'm going to have to get Gary Shoemake to sign that same record, and I'm going to have to frame it somewhere just because I
Awesome.
got that. But anyways, I don't know why I told that story, but that is
No,
such
no,
a cool story.
yeah, I've got that same thing. Not and I love Devil Went Down to Georgia. I think it's a chaparral version that I do. Um, it's just something that I've had forever. And but I have a bunch of records, and like you said, I've taken them to. I went on a cruise where I had a bunch of callers there, and I've got a few Tony Oxendine ones, and uh, gosh, who else? I've got a ton that I want to get copied or signed. The actual 45s. That way, I can make. My hope is to make a tabletop with some acrylic. Put the records
Oh,
down
nice.
and then fill it in. That's the plan there. And I've got about 6 records right now that are autographed. So still working on that. So I got a Tim Mariner record that he signed for me a long, long time ago before he passed.
I love him.
And Charlie
Yeah.
Robertson, I've got a Charlie Robertson Turn the Page 45 that he signed for me. So that's an awesome story, man.
You know, for the longest time, it's interesting how you end up meeting like the big national callers. For the longest time, I never got to, it took forever for me to like run into Tony Oxendine.
Mhm.
I had known about Tony from almost day one of started when I started calling. I knew of him because he recorded for that. His first, I think his first label was Ranch House with Daryl McMillan. And and I got several of his records, and I, of course, I bought the Royal Records when he started recording. But it was after he created Royal Records that I actually met him in person. And the first time I met him was at a national convention. Another funny story. I was at a national convention. I had flown in early to go to the trail-in dance. Somebody had invited me. It's like, well, if you're there, why don't you come and call it the trail-in dance? I'm like, okay. So I remember going and I got in kind of late and I went over, I tried to find the registration booth and the registration booth wasn't open, but there was this caller sitting there. I'm like, oh, I recognize you. I'm like, you're Tony Oxnine. He's like, yeah, hi, I'm Darren Gallina. That's nice to meet you. Yeah, I was coming to, because you couldn't go to the trail-in dance unless you had picked up your registration packet and got your ribbon for the convention, for the national convention. And I was telling him this story, and it's like, it looks like they're closed. And he's like, yeah, I was going to go over and dance and call him. So he gave me his ribbon. He's like, here, take mine. I'm like, are you sure? I mean, because he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. And I said, oh, by the way, open my case and I pull out the very first record that he recorded for Ranch House called Hitchhike. I think I feel a hitchhike coming on. And he, again, he's like, wow. And I think he put the year on it that it was released. It was like 75, 77, somewhere around there. And he signed it for me. So I have a signed copy from him. And he gave me his ribbon. And I went on to the trail-in dance. I called my tip. And yeah, from then
That's awesome.
it's just like he very nice guy. I've talked to him several times. I enjoy listening to his conversations and his stories. So I'm lucky that I get to talk to him a little more. And now all of a sudden, it's just like I see him all the time. So, and I feel very lucky about that.
Now,
Very
as far as
interesting.
conventions, are you going to the nationals here in June?
No.
Nope. Okay.
Here's the thing. So, like you, I'm still a working man, and I go most every year to the, I guess you'd call it the Gay National Convention. The uh they have one every year. And so I go to that convention every year, but it's like the week after IAGSDC. God, how can I forget that? Oh, take away my guide card. The IAGSDC convention every year. And I go to that. And because of my work schedule and all the rest of the weekends that I'm calling and trying to get the collar lab, I only have so much vacation. So I go to that one. So I'm not going to Milwaukee this year. I wanted to go to Shreveport next year because, and I shouldn't give this away, but I kind of feel like a lot of the callers that we grew up with, you know, the national callers and stuff, not traveling much anymore,
No.
and or have retired like Ken Bauer, or aren't calling anymore. I don't know how much calling Gary Shoemake's doing anymore. I don't see his name out there as much as I used to, or they've passed away, you know? And so I think um, the time it's getting to that point where the next generation, if you will, of callers, this is our opportunity to get out there and be heard and get booked for other conventions around the country. And so I think it's going to be important now for me. This is just me thinking for me, that it's going to be important for me to get out to go to national conventions. So I'm planning to go to Waco in 26.
Nice.
I'll
Okay.
go to USA West next year. I've signed up for that in Spokane, Washington. So that's about the national convention. That's about as close to a national convention as I'll get in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I see pictures of you all over the place at the national conventions, here, there,
You
on the stage with the band, calling, "Oh, here I am with so and so."
know,
Am I right?
and you are. I probably put myself out on YouTube and all that more than most, just because I'm trying to get my name out there. But yeah, because I want to travel more. But I never went to a national convention until it came to Atlanta. And that's literally, and I'm not making this up, I live 3 miles from where they had the convention. So it was
No
super
way.
convenient. And, and I went there and then I was just blown away because you get to see so many people. And like you said, I didn't know Tony that well then. I didn't know a bunch of these other callers from other states because I didn't travel like that. So the national convention gives you that opportunity. So after that, I was like, I can't miss another one. And so my wife made me agree. I'm driving to Wisconsin in a week or in 4 weeks or however long it is. I am not looking forward to that. It's about 11 and a half hours. She's going to fly out
Wow.
because I'm going out for the GSI school. Because
Okay.
I can't pass up that school. Because you have so many caller coaches there, and I get to see so many people that I don't normally get to see from the West Coast, from the Midwest, whatever. Um, and like you said too, I try and go to state conventions at least one a year that I've never been to. Again, just to get my name out there. I just got back last week. We were in South Carolina, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and had a great time. And got to see a couple of callers that I don't get to normally see. And Patty Green being one of my favorite callers. And of course, she's from South Carolina, so she was there. So I got to spend some time with her and Steve, her husband. And I've booked a couple dances off of the South Carolina convention. So, and so that's the
What I'm
goal,
talking
is to
about,
get your
man.
name out there. And so, and like we were talking earlier, and I want to get into it. I know we've been going about an hour, but I'm not worried about that. We're going to keep going for a little bit. Of course, it's 11:20 p.m. here, a little earlier for you. Talking about weekends, you just finished one. Tell me what you're doing with your Plus Blast weekend or Saturdays you're doing.
Okay, before I do that, isn't Patty Green the nicest lady in the world?
Phenomenal. Yes. Again,
She,
probably never spoke to her until Atlanta. And since Atlanta, I've run into her at different conventions, Caller Lab specifically, and national conventions. Just a fantastic person and caller and everything else. I love Patty.
now, how far are you from Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina?
I'd probably say 5 hours. I'm in Atlanta, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
So
Just because the IAGSDC convention in July is going to be in Raleigh, Durham, and there's a caller school before then, and Patty's one of the caller coaches there. So I don't know. I mean, if you're
I'm
interested,
gonna look
swing
that up for first thing in the morning.
and check that out. I know I think Betsy Gata is the other coach for that school. Um, but that is going to be a fun weekend. Justin Russell's going to be there. We're going to be there. Um, but anyways, I thought I'd just throw that out. Okay. So
If
yeah,
Justin's
like I told,
involved, I will find a way to be there. So I'll just say that.
so this weekend, well, so like I told you before we started rolling tape, I'm I'm exhausted, but it's a good exhaustion because we just got done with a 12-hour plus blast class with a group of college students.
Okay.
So we have a connection with the local university in San Luis Obispo, Cal Poly University. They have a country line dance club that has a square dancing component to it. There's a history behind that. Um, Back when we got involved before the pandemic, their advisor at the time, Leslie and Bill Rebick, were square dancers and round dancers and line dancers. And so she worked at the university and was the advisor for the club. They got the opportunity to go to a country music festival down in Indio, California, Coachella, California. If you follow big time weekend concerts, Coachella is one of the big ones in California. In fact, it's 2 weekends. The third weekend is called Stagecoach, which is the country western version of the Coachella weekend that's more of pop rock and that kind of stuff. So she was contacted by a square dancer in the San Bernardino area, which is next to Coachella, Indio, California, um, about whether or not their line dance club would like to learn square dancing and come and put on some square dance demonstrations at Stagecoach and get free tickets to Stagecoach. And so she got with me, we got together, we put together a class for a square dance component of their line dance program. And basically, we've been doing blast classes for, I don't know, 6, 7 years there through Cal Poly. Um, and for a couple of years before COVID hit, they took I don't know, 3, 4 squares of college students down to Stagecoach to put on square dance demonstrations throughout the 3-day weekend. And they get free tickets um, into Stagecoach. And basically full access passes to Stagecoach. And those tickets, you're looking at anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a piece. So those kids, and plus they get access to backstage and to meals with staff dining for where, all the workers, all the musicians, everybody that's involved with Stagecoach gets a meal there. And so it was a great experience. So we've kind of kept up with the square dance component, the aspect of the line dance club. And so in the fall of last year, we did the SSD in a weekend, basically, and we did SSD in 12 hours.
Nice.
So basically, that's like 1 week per hour. If you're
Mhm.
familiar with the list, you're like, holy cow. Okay, so we made it through most of SSD. We probably went through 8 to 9 hours, 8 to 9 weeks of SSD in 12 hours. These kids just soak it up so
Sure.
fast. And for the most part, they retain it pretty well. So this past weekend was the plus list that we did in 12 hours. And a few of the mainstream lists that kind of fall in the crack between SSD and plus. Things like Dixie Style to a Wave, Do Paso, All Around the Left Hand Lady, Seesaw, those kind of things, Spin Chain Through, Cloverleaf. Those are kind of not necessarily on the SSD list, but you kind of need to know them
Yeah.
to do some of the plus calls. And we probably got through, there's 29 plus calls, and I think we probably did 25 of them
Nice.
in 12 hours. We did 6 hours yesterday and 6 hours today. So by this afternoon, the last couple hours, everybody, including we took some angels with us. And so everybody was pretty well. We had hit the wall. So yeah. The only thing I think we didn't get to were spin chain and exchange the gears, Dixie Grand, peel off and peel the top. I think were the only ones we didn't do. But they learned everything else and were pretty proficient in most of them by the end of today. So it's absolutely amazing.
It's amazing what the abilities are when you have younger dancers learning it. It's amazing how much they can take in a weekend. It's impressive.
Yeah.
So we've got a handful of younger dancers up in North Georgia, teenage age that one club has. I do not have them, but they dance circles around some of the people that took classes with them, and it's just because they're so young and they can pick up on it.
Well, they're in that learning mentality
Yeah.
because they're in school. And I think that has a lot.
The
That has
best
a
way
lot
I've
to do
ever
with
heard it described, but yet there's some physical aspects of dancing. Well, it's all physical, the movements and all, but you're learning a different language. And then, and that's the easiest description I've ever heard is you're learning a new language. Now some of it is kind of, touch a quarter. That says everything that you need to know. You got to know what the quarter is. But load the boat means something. Spin chain, exchange the gears, spin chain the gears. You're just learning, and once you learn the new vocabulary, if your body will allow you, you now figure out the moves. So, well, man, that's awesome what you have going on there. It's too bad you're not going to make it to nationals. I won't get to see you. So, when's the next time you think you're going to get out of California? I mean, do you go to Color Lab?
I do as frequently as I can.
Okay.
Again, the thing is that I call so much that my vacation, like this year, I took vacation to do a tour of the Pacific Northwest. I was gone for, I don't know, what was it, 5 days. We were in Oregon and Washington for about 5 or 6 dances within a week. And then I made a trip out to Pennsylvania in April, the beginning of April, and I did a weekend out there, but then also did a dance in New Jersey. We flew in early that week to do a dance in New Jersey. So, and then
Now you're going to be in
I'm
Raleigh.
doing,
You're going to be in Raleigh.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
in July. And thank goodness that that's as much traveling I think is what those are our big trips for the year. I'm actually flying out again. This is so weird. Thank you to the musicians in my band. Last year I got booked. The one of the guys that plays fiddle in my band, he has a bluegrass band, and he works through a music booking agency. He got booked for a private event, a wedding in South Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe is a beautiful area in Northern California and Nevada. Well, actually, we were in Nevada, but was on the border of California and Nevada. And and he called me up and he says, "Hey, I'm doing this private gig. It's a wedding. It's a dance for a wedding dinner or something. Bride and groom wanted their dancers. They want a square dance. Can you possibly do this gig?" And I'm like, "Sure." So whoever their entertainment, their music booking agency called me and said, "We don't know anything about square dancing. How does this work?" And so I told him, "He's like, all right, you Jesse said you're good." I'm like, "Well, okay, I am, and I'm perfect for what you need." So they paid me to go up there. They flew me up to basically flew me to Reno, rented my car, paid for my hotel. I went down to South Lake Tahoe, did the gig, and then flew home. Well, the event coordinator who was putting on the whole, apparently the bride to be's father was some sort of billionaire. I don't remember his name. Um, and it was kind of no pictures. You just kind of, you're just here to entertain. I'm like, okay, no worries. So I really don't know who he was. I did see him. I might have shook his hand. I don't know. I don't remember. Um, but anyways, I was talking with the event coordinator for this whole thing. I'm like, yeah. She's like, "You're really good at this kind of stuff." I'm like, "Well, here's my card. If you ever need me, I do travel the United States. I'd be happy to do that." And in most cases, I never hear from these people. So what does she do? She sends me an email earlier this year and she says, "Hey, by the way, can you come out to Rhode Island to do a wedding rehearsal dinner for a couple from Nashville that want square dancing? And do you know any bands in the New York, Rhode Island area?" I'm like, "Let me see what I can do." So I don't know. She found a band, but They're flying me to Rhode Island to the Tennis Hall of Fame. Never heard of the place. Didn't realize there was such a place. Tennis Hall of Fame. They're getting married at the Tennis Hall of Fame. This is going to be really interesting because I am 61. And so the gig is on a Friday night in June. I'm going to fly out Thursday night. I'm going to take the red eye to Boston, rent a car, get a hotel outside of Boston, drive up, do the gig that night in Rhode Island, drive back to the hotel. The next morning, I'm getting up and flying home.
Oh,
And I'm like,
that's
and
a
after I
rock star
booked this,
schedule there, brother.
I'm like, well, I don't have to take any vacation. That's the thing, man. Because I can get off early from work on Thursday, drive to Santa Barbara, take the red eye to the East Coast, get in at 8 o'clock in the morning, get a hotel, maybe get 4 hours sleep. I'm thinking I could do this. But then I'm like, Darren, you're not 30 anymore.
No.
And get back up the next day and fly home and then be to work the next day. Oh God. But anyway, so yeah, but I am going to be in Raleigh, Durham in July. And that's the thing they don't talk about when you're a traveling caller. So I'm when you've got 4 out-of-state gigs in 6 months, you got to book that airfare in advance. So and I remember Sandy Bryant talking about this, having to float those airline tickets until you get paid. And I'm like, boom, wow,
Yeah.
it's a good thing. I got to keep my savings account up because I got to float these tickets. And in the middle of this, my accountant says, "Oh, you're going to owe double this year in taxes of what you owed last year because you made a lot of money last year." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh man." So I ended up having to pay the tax bill too. Oh,
Oh my
the
God.
life of a caller.
No, I know it. I know it.
So, but yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So at some point we're going to have to meet up in person and just
Yeah.
like swap
Hopefully,
stories, man.
I certainly hate dropping something this late in the year on my wife and say, hey, you need to figure out how to get me to Raleigh, Durham. And but I'll talk to her about that because like I said, I do have the nationals coming up, and in August at the Alabama State Convention. I don't know what weekend in August, but that's over there. So it's busy. Love
Speaking
it. What's that?
speaking of state conventions, have you done the Tennessee State Convention?
Oh yeah,
What'd you
love
think of that?
Tennessee. I really enjoy the Tennessee State Convention. I tell everybody, and I've only been to about 8 state conventions now. In my as a caller, and Tennessee is phenomenal. I love Tennessee. The only, and I don't say this in a bad way, but the only drawback to Tennessee, the state convention, it is in downtown Gatlinburg. So first of all the accommodations you could ever want, from 5 star to 1 star, whatever. So plenty, but the traffic in Gatlinburg is horrendous sometimes. So now if you're staying at the hotel that's on the same road, or one of the, because there's several hotels on the same road as the dance hall, the conference center, it's
Mhm.
outstanding. But if you're staying somewhere off site and you've got to drive back, it's a rough drive. And it's not far, but the actual setup is phenomenal. They have so many rooms. They have a live band. Tennessee is a great state convention. The only drawback, if any, is you're in downtown Gatlinburg, and it's rough sometimes, just with traffic. But if you've never been, you absolutely should go. We try and go every year. I think we're going to miss it this year because it's also in August, I think. So we're going to go to Alabama instead.
Yeah, I had seen pictures, I think from last year, or maybe the year before. And I'm like, wow, that looks like fun. And I guess even if you're from out of state, you could still get on the calling program as a caller.
You can. You've got to. You got to reach out to whoever's programming. I forget who it is this year. And I almost forgot. But the one of the favorite things to me about Tennessee, there's a outstanding karaoke bar 1 block over. That every night, Friday night and Saturday night, me, of course, my wife, Justin Russell, Jet Roberts. I think Patty went with us. We all go over there to the karaoke bar and have a few drinks and do karaoke and all that. So it's a great convention. It really is. I enjoy it. And it's close. It's 3 hours for me to get to Gatlinburg for the most part, 3.5. So
Eh,
something to go to
Yeah,
if you can make it.
that's on my list. One of these times I'd like to go. I'd like to go and do it. And I talked to Justin about it. And he's like, "Yeah, sure, you should come out and do it." I'm like, "Okay, well, one of these days." It's on my list. I would
That's a
enjoy
good
it
one.
for sure.
Definitely worth doing at least once. Before we shut it down for the night, I have to ask. I do all the other people that I've talked to. And this is just your personal opinion. Footloose or Dirty Dancing? The Kevin Bacon Footloose. What's your favorite?
Ooh, how embarrassing. I am probably, I'm embarrassed to say that I have not seen either one of them.
Are you serious?
No.
Not even Dirty Dancing? Patrick
My
Swayze?
boss at my boss at work gets on me about not being up on movie trivia. I can give you all sorts of kinds of music trivia, but not movie
Okay,
trivia.
okay, okay,
Based on what I know, I would probably go with Footloose.
okay. Gotcha. Yep, that's
Just
good.
my opinion.
That's my choice between the two. But I started that early on in the podcast, trying to get a little something personal about people and your thoughts on that stuff. So, yep, Footloose guy.
No, this has been
So,
fun. I've enjoyed it.
So you're not a movie guy, or you just didn't watch those movies? What do you do for entertainment? Not square dancing.
Ah, ah, what do I do outside of square dancing? I watch a little bit of TV. Once in a while I go to movies. I don't remember a lot of movies. That's embarrassing. I don't remember a lot of movies I've seen. Um, I kind of dabble in model railroading too, just a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
I don't have a layout or anything. One of our dancers who's also into it, he and I kind of geek out over that stuff. He has a layout. Uh, I have a few locomotives and some cars, and so I just take mine over to his and I run them around his track. And sometimes like he goes to the same square dances we do, so sometimes if there's like a good model railroad store in town, he and I'll sneak off to the railroad store. Or if
Oh,
there's like when we're in San Diego, Balboa Park is a huge park with a bunch of museums in it, including a model railroad museum, and periodically we'll sneak to Balboa. Sometimes the weekends are held at Balboa Park, and we'll just sneak over to the railroad museum and just kind of
my brother
hang
is
out.
not now. Of course, my brother's 2 years younger than me. But as a kid, he was a huge had model railroads and all that. My dad actually retired from the railroad a long, long time. He's passed away now, but he retired from. Uh, it's no longer in existence. Seaboard Coastline Railroad, which was out of Savannah and down there. And I don't know who they sold out to, but he retired from there. So we were big into the railroad for a while. I just never got into models and the trains and all that stuff. But my brother had the tracks and had the giant plywood set up in his bedroom and all that, and still does that. So,
Cool.
Aaron, it's been awesome talking to you, buddy. We don't get much chance
Same
to talk
here.
when you're on the West Coast. Hopefully, I will see if I can pull off the Raleigh Durham thing and get up there at least to the caller school, because I certainly don't want to miss out on Patty and Justin. If they're in the same place, I try and get over there. And if not, hopefully at a caller lab or something, we can run up on each other and have some more conversation.
Absolutely. I'd look forward to it.
Okay. And I'd like
Forward
to
to it,
I'd
man.
like to do another podcast. Like, you've been calling a really long time, so there's a lot more stories we haven't even gotten into. So let's do it again
Yeah, I
sometime,
never
brother.
I didn't even get to tell you about the time Gary Shumate climbed up on the roof of my house.
Well, we will definitely tell that story because that's what I was looking for with this. I couldn't have asked for anything else tonight, man. It was a good time. Got some really good
Yeah,
stories, and this will be coming out this Friday. And and you can put it out on whatever you want. So I just want to get the word out about you and
absolutely.
and what we like to do, square dance calling. So,
Absolutely.
Darren, it's a pleasure, brother. Thank you for doing this. I will do it again, and hopefully somewhere down the road I'll get to see you maybe this year in July, if not sometime in the future.
Super. Thanks for having me. This has been a real fun time. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks, man. It's good talking to you, Darren. See you, buddy.
Mhm.
Science Space Grand Square. Circle left, winding your way down Baker Street, lighting your head and dead on your feet, brother. Men start right. One time tonight, left down a man and you weep. This city desert makes you feel so cold. It's got so many people, but it's got no soul. And it's taking you so long to find out you were wrong when you thought it held everything. Head square through and roll it forward, and you know those side of the corner one time you go. Swing through the tonight. You spin the top alright. Boy, move up right, left through. Square through and roll it 3/4 round. You're gonna swing the girl and promenade on down, and then you settle down in some quiet little town. Forget about everything. Head square through and roll it 4 and you know. Go side of the corner one time you go. Swing through tonight. You spin the top alright. Boy, move up right and left through. Square through and roll it 3/4 round. You're gonna swing your girl and promenade on down, and then you settle down some quiet little town. Forget about sides, face, grand, square. You used to think that it was so easy. You used to say that it was so easy, but you're trying now. Allemande and weave. Another year and then you'd be happy. Just one more year and then you'd be happy. But you're crying now. Side square through and roll it 4 and you know. Go side of the corner one time and go. Swing through tonight. Spin the top alright. Boy, move up right and left through. Square through and roll it 3/4 round. You're gonna swing your girl and promenade on down, and then settle down in some quiet little town. Forget about everything. Side square through and roll it 4 and you know. Go side of the corner one time and go. Swing through tonight. Spin the top alright. Boy, move up right and left through. Square through and roll it 3/4 round. You're gonna swing your girl and promenade on down, and then you settle down some quiet little town. Forget about sides, face, grand, square. You used to think that it was so easy. You used to say that it was so